I guess we are all set and we can start. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your time and interest and for being with us today in this nice evening. I hope you are safe and healthy. This is Melike Akşahin from RestartLab. I hope you enjoy today's session and we all have an amazing experience today. Before moving on to the session, I would like to give you some brief information about RestartLab. We call RestartLab as a cross-industry think tank organization. In RestartLab, we would like to question the work concept and try to redefine the work concept. We are exploring alternative ways to organize and we are seeking human-centric working environments. We are questioning the traditional way of working and challenge the status quo. We know that there are organizations worldwide that adopted self-managing principles and achieve to be more human-centric, where employees are happy to work. So we believe that sharing this experience will inspire us too. For that reason, we have organized this third RestartLab event to get inspiration from Doug Kirkpatrick about Morningstar's story. I'm pleased to introduce you our guest for Doug Kirkpatrick. Welcome, Doug. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and it's a pleasure meeting you here. How are you?
Super fantastic, Melike. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm also very excited to be here with you and moderating this session. We are looking forward to hearing your speech, and after Doug's speech, we will have plenty of time for question and answers. And now I would like to leave the word to Doug.
Thank you very much, Melike. Pleasure, an honor to be here today with all of you. Traditional management is broken. Traditional management is broken beyond repair. It can no longer be repaired and made functional for the 21st century. We know this for several reasons. First, we look at engagement statistics around the world. And regardless of which survey group you look at, 2/3 to 3/4 of workers are disengaged. That means they've checked out, they're putting in their time, they're not passionate about what they do, they're making money so that they can do the things they like to do on the weekend. Disengagement is sky high. And 20% of American workers, for example, are actively disengaged. This means that they are actively undermining their own workplaces. This is where we get sabotage and harassment and bullying and drug use and absenteeism and all the other dysfunctions of work. Gallup organization estimates the cost of this dysfunction around $500 billion US per year, not a trivial amount. The second data point we can look at is what Gary Hamel, the management theorist, calls the management tax. This is the burden of bureaucracy. It's the direct and indirect cost of bureaucracy. Hamel's group estimates the cost of the management tax is about $3 trillion US per year in the US alone. If you extrapolate that worldwide, you're looking at tens of trillions of dollars. And this is waste. This is a burden, it's bureaucracy, it's non-productive, inefficient work. But it's more than simply a financial cost, it's also a moral cost. We are literally wasting people's lives, doing things that do not matter, time that they would much rather spend with their friends and their families and their civic organizations and their communities. We're wasting people's lives. We also look at the stress levels in society and the stress levels in management and business. In the US, about 20%, almost 20% of American adults suffer from anxiety disorders. The IBM did a study a few years ago that they published in a white paper called Capitalizing on Complexity. And they found that most executives doubt their own ability to manage complexity. So this is a real problem. This is not healthy. This is not a good thing. We don't need people losing health, losing their sleep, suffering from stress and anxiety, and paralyzed and unable to make progress in the world. This is a real serious problem. And if you look at the world of complexity, we have accelerating technological change and staggering social and generational change. In some cases, we're trying to manage 4 to 5 generations in a single workplace, all with different expectations about work. And then we look at blockchain, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, nanotechnology, robotics, genetic engineering. Now we have 4D printing. So we've already blasted beyond 3D printing. Now we have to deal with 4D printing. So this is a real stress situation across the world, everywhere. And then we wrap all this stress and anxiety and burden and moral cost and disengagement. We wrap all this with dysfunctional language. So we talk about human resources. Well, people aren't resources, they're human beings. We talk about direct reports as if people are file folders. We talk about man hours as if women don't exist. We talk about head count as if people don't have bodies. We use dysfunctional industrial age language in the workplace, and then we're surprised why people aren't engaged at work. It's a real problem. Is there a way out of this management purgatory in which we find ourselves? Well, I think there is. So that's the story I'm going to tell you today. This gentleman is named Dee Hock, and he's the founder of Visa, the world's largest, one of the world's largest credit organizations. And Dee Hock is now in his 90s. He's a very wise man. He wrote a book called Chaotic Organizations, Balancing Chaos and Order. And he famously said that complex rules cause simple, stupid behavior. And simple rules allow for complex, intelligent behavior. Can we create organizations that use simple rules to allow for complex, intelligent behavior? This is an overhead of a roundabout. It happens to be located in Swindon, England, in the UK. It's actually 7 roundabouts in one. So there's one roundabout surrounding this set of roundabouts. There's one in the middle, and then there are 5 around the midsection. 7 roundabouts in one. This has been in operation for 60 years. No traffic signals whatsoever. The roundabout operates on 2 simple principles. The first principle is that you yield to the cars already in the roundabout. And the second principle is that you position your car in the correct lane for your exit. And as long as you adhere to these 2 simple rules, you're able to navigate any roundabout anywhere in the world. This roundabout's been in constant operation for 60 years. Roundabouts have far greater throughput and productivity than traditional intersections. No one has to stop or start. 15 to 80% greater productivity. Roundabouts have much greater safety records. People can't run into other cars in a perpendicular fashion. They have far less pollution. Cars aren't starting and stopping. The advantages are far greater than traditional intersections based on 2 simple rules. So 30 years ago, actually 31 years ago to the month, 31 years ago to the month, a young entrepreneur named Chris Rufer had an idea for a new state-of-the-art food processing factory here in Northern California. And he pulled together a small core team to help him realize his vision. And the reason that I know about this is because I was part of the team. I was the financial controller. And Chris pulled together this team. We were working out of a tiny little farmhouse on a dusty canal bank here in the countryside in California. And I joined exactly 31 years ago. And we were working out of this little farmhouse and working very long hours trying to bring this project online, working about 100 hours a week or so. And one day Chris came into the farmhouse and said, I'd like to call a meeting of the colleagues and talk about governance. How are we going to organize this company? And the company is called Morningstar. And we said, sure, yeah, we'd be happy to meet. So we met at night in a dusty construction trailer out on the job site. And we sat around in a circle on steel folding chairs, and he passed out a document called the Morningstar Colleague Principles. And the principles boiled down to two things. The first principle was that human beings should not use force or coercion against other human beings. And if you think about that principle, it's the foundation of all law everywhere in the world. So every law against assault and battery and theft and burglary and kidnapping and murder and all the rest is based on the principle that human beings should not use force against others. And the second principle was that people should keep the commitments they make to each other. If you say you're going to do something, you should do it. You need to do it. And if you find you can't do it, you need to renegotiate the commitment. And keeping commitments is also a foundational principle of law. It's the foundation of civil law and contract law. Contract law would mean nothing if parties didn't do what they said they were going to do. And so we discussed and debated these principles for a couple of hours. At the end of the evening, we just looked at each other and said, we have no objection to these principles. They're very clear. They're self-evident principles. And so we adopted them as the entire governance of the enterprise. And when we walked out of the trailer, at that moment, we became a self-managed enterprise. This was March of 1990, 31 years ago. We had a lot of work to do. So we had thousands of hectares of tomatoes coming up out of the ground up and down the state of California for hundreds of miles. We had to hire hundreds of people to operate the factories and drive the trucks. We had vital equipment arriving on ocean cargo freighters from Milan, Italy, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, waiting to go through the Panama Canal. And we had hundreds of contractors on the job site 24 hours a day, constructing, fabricating, pulling wire, building, equipping. Well, finally, on July 16th of 1990, we turned on the factory and we produced 90 million pounds, 45 million kilograms of industrial tomato concentrate for the world market. And we changed the cost structure of our entire industry virtually overnight. And we did it without a single human boss, manager, supervisor, vice president, designated leader, no titles, no command authority. All we had were human beings committed to a mission, performing work. The company went on to grow. We added another factory and then another factory. We expanded operations up and down the supply chain toward customers in remote warehouses across North America, toward the supply in terms of farming and harvesting and transplanting and trucking. We added more capacity and more capacity. We became the largest tomato processor in the world, and everyone in the North America, at least, has eaten our product. It goes into everything you can think of in their grocery store, from ketchup to salsa, pizza sauce, barbecue sauce, steak sauce, spaghetti sauce, and thousands of other products. And millions more have eaten our product around the world because we export worldwide. And we have never deviated from our two core principles: don't use force and keep commitments. So this story became interesting. In 2010, author Gary Hamel came out. He's the author of the new book, Humanocracy. He came out, paid a visit to us, spent some time. In December of 2011, the Harvard Business Review made us the cover story. They described us on the cover as the world's most creatively managed company. So this begs the question, how can this possibly work? It just seems impossible. It's too simple. And so I'd like to share a little bit about how it does work and what is the secret sauce. The first thing that's important to keep in mind is we start with principles. We start with the two core principles I mentioned: don't use force and keep commitments. We believe these are the most fundamental principles of human interaction. They are to human beings what gravity is to physics. The most fundamental principles. If you imagine a world, for example, where everyone aligned with not using force against other human beings, we wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And of course, we understand that's not reality. We understand that's not realistic, but that's not the point. The point is, the closer we approach that ideal state, the better off we are as people, the more space we open up for human happiness, harmony, prosperity, teamwork, and all the good things of life. Take the second principle. Imagine a world where everyone did what they said they were going to do. That would be amazing. It'd be an amazing world. But again, we know that's not realistic. We understand that's not our reality. But again, that's not the point. The point is, the closer we get to that ideal state, the better off we are as human beings, and the more space we open up for human happiness, harmony, prosperity, teamwork, community, and all the good things of life. And so those are the principles in which we invested our entire system of relationship and governance at Morningstar, the most fundamental principles of human interaction. By the way, two principles, just like a roundabout. Very simple, managing great complexity. The second principle is we ask people to give up power. So when you can't use force, it means no one has any authority to tell another person what to do. No one can walk up to another person and say, stop doing this and start doing that. No one has any authority to unilaterally fire another person. Everything is accomplished through request and response. Now, at Morningstar, you do have a responsibility to respond in a professional manner to requests, but because people are free agents, they're free to say no. So there is no coercive command authority whatsoever. People don't have that authority. The third principle is that we see human beings as the ultimate reality. Every business that's ever existed or ever will exist exists to serve one of 8 human commercial needs. Once you get past food, clothing, and shelter, there's communication, transportation, entertainment, personal security, and healthcare. That's it. So we understand that all business is about human beings. It's about serving commercial human needs. Human beings are the ultimate reality. Teams are concepts. Business units are concepts. Companies are concepts. Only human beings are real. Only individual human beings can act and make decisions. Human beings are the ultimate reality. This is about managing great complexity with very simple principles. The other aspect of this that we accomplish through self-management is we slash the management tax. So if you think about most companies, there's generally a span of control of 1 to 10 on average around the world. So for every 10 workers, there's usually a manager or a boss that makes more money than the workers do. Well, here's the challenge. Here's the opportunity, I should say, for self-management. If we envision a startup with 10 workers making, say, $30,000 a year and a boss making $90,000 a year, the opportunity here is to recognize that these 10 workers are already managers in their own personal lives. Every one of these people, everyone makes gigantic life-changing decisions already on their own without a boss. We decide what to do with our lives, our careers. We decide who to date, who to marry, what to do for a living, whether to buy a car or a house. We make gigantic decisions already without a boss. It's only when we enter the workplace that suddenly we're too incompetent to do anything without a boss. So the opportunity here is we can amplify the commercial management skills of the 10 workers, give them all a $5,000 a year raise, and we don't need the boss at all. And we just saved ourselves $40,000 a year, every year. Now, if this company scales by a factor of 10, so we have 100 workers at a span of control of 1 to 10, that means we have 10 bosses. Actually, we have 11 bosses because the 10 bosses now need a boss of their own. And that boss probably makes $200,000 a year. So the opportunity there is we can recognize that every one of those 100 workers is already a manager. We can amplify their commercial management skills, give them all a $5,000 a year raise, and we don't need the 10 bosses, and we don't need the boss of the 10 bosses, and we've just saved ourselves $600,000 a year, every year. So the net present value of that over a decade's probably $3 or $4 million. All things being equal, a company that figures out how to slash the management tax will always prevail in competition against companies that keep paying it unnecessarily. So we believe that no command authority, we believe self-management leads to real leadership. Traditional leadership based on command and control causes leadership muscles to get weaker, to atrophy. If I can just tell people what to do with the expectation that my commands will be obeyed, that's actually not really leadership. That's just telling people what to do. Self-management causes leadership muscles to get stronger and better. If I have to earn the mantle of leadership through trust, respect, and communication, that makes me a better, stronger leader. Self-management creates leaders everywhere. It creates an entire organization of leaders. That's an unstoppable force in the marketplace. So we believe in natural leadership through self-management. Everyone is free to lead. Everyone is free to innovate. Innovations pop up at Morningstar from everywhere at all times. We had a mechanic one year who just theorized a better way to handle materials, sketched out some engineering diagrams, got buy-in from his fellow colleagues, talked to a finance colleague, found some budget, implemented a little capital project, saved millions of dollars. Innovation springs forth, gushes forth from everywhere, unexpectedly. And we believe in work as play, so we gamify work. We give people the freedom to select the metrics that make sense for them. We call these stepping stones. We call them stepping stones because we consider them stepping stones toward perfection. We don't benchmark other companies, other industries, other sectors. We benchmark perfection. So perfection for a cost metric is 0. Perfection for an efficiency metric is 100%. When people are benchmarking perfection, it unlocks blue sky innovation thinking. And that's where a lot of our innovation comes from. For example, we use gravity to feed tomatoes into the plants. Why? Because gravity is free. Competitors use motors and electricity. Those aren't free. We use evaporation to cool water for our process. Why? Because evaporation is free. Competitors use giant electrified cooling towers. Those aren't free. We believe in aligning with Mother Nature. and using principles of freedom and accountability. So we believe that this is real accountability. In a self-managed enterprise, when one takes full responsibility for a portfolio of services, there is no place to hide. When things go well with a service or not well with a service, there's no one to talk to other than the person who owns that particular service. True accountability. We usually don't talk about empowerment at Morningstar. We consider self-management to be beyond empowerment. Empowerment programs usually involve a person with power in an organization lending his or her power to a subordinate who has less power. And the problem with that scenario is that anything that is loaned can be repossessed. Self-management is beyond empowerment. Self-management is power itself. It's part of the DNA of the organization. So we instantiate these understandings between colleagues with agreements. We call them colleague letters of understanding. And these colleague letters of understanding describe the who, what, why, when, where, and how of work. What is my personal commercial mission? Why am I here? Why do I come to work here? How does what I do align with the mission of the enterprise? How do I pursue perfection? How do I pursue excellence? What is my portfolio of services? What is the scope and quantum of my decision-making authority? With whom do I need to be connected in this network? And what are the measures? What are the stepping stones that I will use to try to achieve perfection and play the game of work? We digitize these colleague letters of understanding. And this is a frame from a time-lapse movie that we made as we came together in our first factory in Los Banos, California, and formed colleague letters of understanding, agreements by and between peers, each of whom has an equal voice. I'm this teal dot right here. I was a financial controller at the time. And we self-selected relationships, we self-formed teams, and this is a time-lapse movie. It's in constant motion as we connect and disconnect and reconnect in different ways in response to the marketplace and the forces that are driving us in the business world. A few years ago, some colleagues took the digitized file of colleague letters of understanding to a computer lab at the University of California, Davis, and they took a snapshot. This is the org chart of Morningstar. And again, if this were a time-lapse movie, it would be in constant motion as people negotiate and renegotiate their roles and responsibilities. This is about 300 people or so, and they are self-formed teams, self-connected teams. This is much like a spider web, and spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel. This is a robust, resilient, strong organization. If a couple of people decide to leave, it would not matter because the remaining colleagues quickly reallocate roles and responsibilities to cover gaps. It's a strong, robust, resilient network of collective intelligence and focused, customer-focused, mission-driven self-managers. So lest you think that Morningstar is the only weird network company out there in the world, I can assure you there are other companies that are breaking some amazing ground out in the world. You may have heard of Haier. They're the world's largest appliance manufacturer based in Qingdao, China. 70,000 employees worldwide. Their visionary CEO, Zhang Rumin, has created 4,000 self-managed teams, most of which are service teams like IT and legal affairs and risk management, but several hundred of them are customer-facing teams that perform devise services and products for customers. on a self-managed basis. This is a marketplace, a dynamic marketplace of self-managers in 4,000 teams. Jaipur Rugs is an amazing company in Jaipur, India. I was able to visit them the year before last. And this is their visionary founder, Nan Kishore Chowdhury. And he has totally upended the business model in his industry. His company is Jaipur Rugs. They make high-end luxury carpets for the world market. The carpets take months to weave. They're woven on hand looms by weavers in small villages around India. They sell for thousands of dollars. They last for hundreds of years. Beautiful works of art that you can walk on or hang on your wall. He has changed the lives of tens of thousands of weavers in villages across India by making them self-managers, by cutting out the middleman, by giving them the fruits of their labors, by taking them on marketing trips to Europe, by allowing them to deliver keynote speeches at conferences, by allowing them to create their own art. He has unleashed the power of self-management throughout India. You probably recognize this beautiful double helix of DNA. So two twisted strands. These twisted strands are made of the simplest substances. It's sugar and phosphate. Very, very simple substance. And yet between these two strands, the very simple substances contains all the information needed to create every one of us and every living thing on the planet Earth. Amazing complexity derived from great simplicity. Two twisted strands, just like the two rules governing a roundabout, just like the two core principles of Morningstar. Simplicity can govern great complexity. So this is a fellow that's been dead for a few hundred years. This is Immanuel Kant, 18th century German philosopher. And Immanuel Kant was a big writer and believer in free will. And in self-management, we believe in free will. We know we have free will because, for example, we chose to be here today at this event when we could have chosen to be someplace else. So we all exercised our free will to be here today. Jean Ramin, the chairman of Higher, is a big believer in Immanuel Kant and the power of free will, as are we at Morningstar. We want people to be free, and we want them to be free to make agreements with each other and work together in harmony and create contracts and agreements with each other that allow us to pursue a mission while balancing freedom and accountability and managing great complexity with great simplicity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. I am amazed about your speech, and it was a pleasure to hear from you from the first hand. So I believe the audience also has enjoyed the speech because I see a lot of questions coming. It's a difficult concept to envision when you remember the muscle memory of our traditional organizations. It sounds like it's like a freedom, but actually, when I read a phrase from a team member from Morningstar, he says that nobody is your boss, everybody is your boss. So actually, it is you have the decision power, and it's a great responsibility on your shoulders. But still, it's difficult to envision. That's why I believe there are many good questions right now. I think I will have a difficult time while selecting among them. So I would like to start. One of the questions, they say that, are your people happy enough in that environment, or do they always want for more?
My sense in performing and reading surveys for about 30 years is that people are quite happy overall. I mean, you can't account for every single person, of course, but for the most part, people are quite happy. And I'll give you an example. Last summer, I was able to interview some seasonal workers, and we have a seasonal cohort of people who come back and they work year after year from July to early October, and they perform hourly functions like sorting tomatoes and driving forklift trucks, etc. And I found some seasonal workers from our first factory that had been coming back every year for 30 straight years. And they came back every year for 30 straight years, and they're laid off for 8.5 to 9 months every year. They come back for 30 years because they love the environment, they love being self-managed, and they love the social aspect of coming back and seeing their friends whom they've been working with for maybe 30 years as well. So that's amazing to me. And these are for the most part, lower paying jobs that are just repetitive, you know, in a lot of cases, difficult work. But the people love the environment, the ecosystem, they love to come back. So I think that's great evidence of happiness.
Perfect. They stick to that environment and they love being there. Perfect. Another question, is self-managing is okay for everyone? And did you meet some that doesn't fit in that kind of culture? Because we also witness some people, even in agile transformation, they cannot stick with the organization when they have to change the way of working. So we wonder.
Yes, some people don't like it. There are two sides to that coin. So some people come from traditional organizations, and perhaps they are mid-career, perhaps they have a business degree, and they're being hired for some particular subject matter expertise, supply chain, for example. They may come into the organization and think that they can reorient the wiring of their brain to adapt to self-management, but they're just too conditioned to command and control. And so sometimes people do not work out because they like to have that kind of power that comes with a title and command and control. The flip side is that sometimes people just want to be told what to do, and show up and do their job and go home. And if it's something that needs to be done and it's a voluntary association and everybody's happy with the circumstances and the compensation and everything else, that's fine. If someone just wants to come in and turn the lights on in the morning for $1 a day and we need that done and it's a win-win situation, that's perfectly okay. But if people are coming to work and really shying away from acquiring decision rights and decision-making authority for roles for which they are intended to make decisions, then that can be a problem. So they need to assume some accountability for the role, or probably need to go find someplace else to work.
Yes, I believe the muscle atrophy that you mentioned, because when we get used to hear some people saying that what we are going to do consistently, we get used to that and we start doing that work, but we don't get the responsibility to make decisions, etc. Sometimes it's easier. So when you get used to that, it's difficult to change that. Yes, I see. Another question. A few days ago, Michel Zanini and Gary Hamel wrote about management workforce has increased more than workforce in general. Why does bureaucracy keep growing?
Yeah, bureaucracy has a mind of its own. I like to look at the history of traditional management and bureaucracy. And in North America, it really started with a train wreck on October 5th of 1841, when two locomotives collided on the Western Railway in Massachusetts and killed some people. And so that was a problem. And the railway hired an engineer named George Whistler to study it. And he brought in theories from the Prussian military and adopted what we think is the world's first business org chart, which was a top-down command and control org chart. And that's where lines of authority and departments and all the other detritus of traditional management came from. The sole purpose of this exercise was to find out who to blame. It was a blame-finding exercise. And unfortunately, that's the model that industrial America adopted in the 1840s, and that's carried through ever since and spread throughout the world. And I see it when I travel around the world. You know, we want to find out who to blame, and then once we find out who to blame, then we have to figure out how to punish the people that we've decided to blame. So, you know, it's a very negative sort of connotation and origin. And until we, I think, grapple with the roots of traditional bureaucracy, we're not going to stop its growth and its propagation. It's got a mind of its own, and it likes to grow and spread. I mean, I've heard of high-tech companies here in the United States that you know, reach $1 billion and have, you know, 600 or 700 vice presidents, because they just don't know any better. So we need to spread the word that there's better ways to work.
Yes, we are also trying to do that. We will see what happens in the upcoming years or decades in Turkey. So, how salary and benefits compensations are managed in a self-managed environment?
Right. So, generally speaking, the marketplace for talent sets starting salaries when we hire people. I've done a lot of recruiting. Morningstar, for example, if I were hiring a technician, for example, an industrial electrician, at the time I was hiring, I knew for a fact that that particular role in this particular geographic location required a yearly salary of $110,000 a year. That's the marketplace for talent. And so with that, there's generally a premium associated with the salary, representing the fact that every single person is a manager. So Morningstar asks more from people than most companies. It asks people to be involved in strategy for their particular area or business unit, planning, organizing, leadership roles, budgeting, selecting operational personnel, and engaging in teamwork across the enterprise. So Morningstar asks more and it pays more. So there's a premium associated with the base salary. So that kind of determines the starting salary. And the premium may be 10%, it depends on the circumstances. That's the starting salary. Then at the end of each year, there's a compensation process. So each factory location creates a compensation committee, and everyone associated with that location prepares a packet of information consisting of their colleague letter of understanding, their contract, their stepping stones, which are their performance measures. And then if a person wants a pay increase above and beyond the cost of living for that year is determined by the government, then they must present a business case to the compensation committee and sell that business case to the committee. And so they engage in dialogue around that. And ultimately, that results in an agreement with both parties being happy. So that's how it works.
Kind of a advice process, I guess, with that you present your case and then get the advice and decide collaboratively.
Yeah, so it's a negotiation, and most people don't present a case. By the way, most people are happy with the
Mm-hmm.
cost of living increase, but some people present a case, and then it's a negotiation. And then, if the parties are unable to agree, they engage in a reconciliation process called gaining agreement, which is a stepwise mediation process, and potentially resulting in an arbitration decision. So um, everything is capable of being resolved. Every conceivable disagreement can be resolved.
Because I think this is the related with, I always believe that this is related with the internal motivation of the individuals. Because when there is a traditional way to work, maybe with higher salaries in a different organization, if you are still sticking with that organization, then maybe you are born to live with that self-managing principle, so with internal motivation. But sometimes maybe people would like to climb the stairs and we have the power so that they leave the organization. So I believe it's really related with the motivation of the individual. So another question, cross-functional teams is a must for self-managing organizations?
Yes, so we have teams, business units that are fairly well defined within the organization, because our factories consist of continuous process flow manufacturing. So every step in the process sort of constitutes a logical business unit. So those are logical teams. But people are free to self-form teams across the enterprise depending on the requirements of the moment. So in response to a customer demand, people may form a hot team that crosses geographic locations and disciplines. In response to a regulatory challenge or a legal challenge, there may be a cross-functional team formed. And then when the need for a team disappears, then the team can dissipate. And so we can form and reform and move about in response to whatever the needs are of the moment. But we do have kind of logical business units located within locations and across locations, representing different disciplines.
I have another question in the list, which I also wonder the answer of this question. Another HR question, let's say. What are the basic skills you look for when hiring, and what kind of employees or skills cannot cope with the staff management approach in Morningstar?
Well, we look for one's first and foremost one's ability to self-manage. So self-management requires some internal personal strengths and skills to do it well, to do it at a high level. And so those are things like one's ability to take initiative. So that's a huge one. We have non-negotiables, of course, like honesty and integrity and things like that, but ability to take initiative, ability to be accountable. So it's the idea of conscious leadership. Do I hold myself accountable, and am I willing to hold others accountable for their commitments? Um, Being able to maintain a network. I showed the network diagram. Being able to maintain good, warm relationships throughout the network, at least maintain what some call the power of weak ties, able to relate to them as human beings, keep relationships warm so that when you need to form a hot team or you need help with a problem, that people are more willing to help out. Um, just conscious leadership, just understanding, when you have to exercise courage, when you have to hold others accountable for ethics, understanding constraints and realities, budgets, personalities, all the other things that go into the terrain of daily work, and then being able to have a vision of a desired future state, into which you can invite people as a leader, whether it's for an entire factory or the entire enterprise or for a particular business unit or even part of a business unit. So we just look for people that are good communicators, are able to articulate their needs and ask for help when needed. Those kinds of personal characteristics that lend themselves to good self-management.
Thank you. I have a tricky question. Is self-management more of a socialism that frees people or a capitalism that actually make use of people more?
That's a tricky question. I think self-management is more like capitalism. It really is about creating a big marketplace inside the organization, a marketplace for talent and ambition and interest and curiosity and value creation. As Gary Hamel says, we need more capitalism. The problem with capitalism isn't that there isn't enough of it. We need more of it. We need to help everybody in organizations become a capitalist. So the mechanic that I mentioned that theorized a better way of handling materials and created a great innovation. We need more people like that. They're willing to step up and create great value for themselves and their fellow colleagues.
Thank you. There is a decision-making question. For example, if I would like to buy a machine which will be used in production line and priced at 500,000 USD, who makes the decision?
So that decision is likely going to go to the founder, the owner of the company. And the reason is that two principles basically govern situations where decision rights are not made explicit or explicitly negotiated. And those two principles are what Frederick Laloux calls the advice process in reinventing organizations. So you need to consult with people who will be affected by a given decision, and you need to involve the expertise of people who can potentially contribute to the decision. So a large decision like that would have great financial impact. There would be huge opportunity costs involved. So it's quite important that someone making that decision involve the owner who holds the purse strings and every single person who would be affected by the installation of that particular machine. So that decision could take a while, but we think that decisions in self-management can perhaps take longer than in traditional organizations, but we think we get better decisions. We get better quality decisions because we get more input from people who have a stake in the decision.
We have many more questions. I would like to continue with one more. You mentioned about the principles, about the commitments. You should honor your commitments, keep your commitments. And is there any time that people keep breaking their commitments? What happens in that case?
Well, in that case, assuming that's a chronic problem, at some point, someone will ask them to leave the company. And it's a request, it's not a command, it's a request. Excuse me. And so the person has to respond to the request. And sometimes that request has been made and the person said, okay, I'll leave. My head's not really in the work anymore. I should go do something else. That's happened. More often than not, they will disagree, in which case the person making the request, if they believe in the request, they can invoke the gaining agreement process and escalate the request through mediation and perhaps arbitration.
Mhm. So this could come from a peer, since there are no like managers or bosses.
Anyone can make that request of anyone else.
Yeah, perfect.
A person that's sorting tomatoes for $9 an hour can request a year-round salaried colleague to leave the company.
Okay, so
everyone has an equal voice. Everyone has an equal voice in this network with respect to matters that affect them. It's not democracy or voting. It's about protecting the voices of each and every person in the ecosystem. And it's about due process. So just because someone asks me to leave, that doesn't mean I have to leave. I can choose to leave, but I can also choose to try and stay if that's what I choose to do. Free will.
Perfect. It's like a dream. So we have 2 more minutes, but do you have 10 more minutes for us? Because I have a lot of questions. If you have some time, 10 minutes, I would like to ask some more, but I won't coerce you, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. And I do have an obligation to respond professionally to your request. Melike, I would love to stay, but I've got a 9 o'clock call at 9 o'clock my time. I need to meet my colleague online. And so it's been a tremendous pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it enormously. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. It was a pleasure for me and for all of us, I believe, to host you here. And we are truly thankful for your invaluable contribution today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
You. Bye. I guess we are heading to the end of our session today. Thank you for your time. And thank you for choosing us to be here in this nice evening. But before closing, I would like to provide some information about our next events. First, we will be organizing a co-creation workshop in March about fostering remote collaboration. And we are aiming to create a cross-industry participants group and try to co-create ideas for 3 sprints. If you are interested to be part of this 3 sprints, you can apply that co-creation workshops from our LinkedIn page. The post is pinned on top of our LinkedIn page. And secondly, we will be hosting Michel Zanini, the co-author of the book Humanocracy, in March. Stay tuned for our announcements and stay safe and have a nice evening. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you all for being with us.